I've only raced only 4 Ironmans this year. So you take the 4 Ironmans and you multiply it by how many hours they've worked out. And then you look at the diets and the sugars they eat in order to do it. It's like this vicious.
Yeah.
And that's where I've talked about when you think about ego. So the validation of like, and I don't know how many Ironmans I've raced, but I'm very proud that I don't have an Ironman tattoo.
Tom Hodge. I caught up to this guy who's the global endurance adventurer, so it is a rare, privileged event to sit down with you and talk about the amazing happenings. You're like Walter Mitty in real life here. So I thought we would get into some of your interesting story, maybe jumping right now to this recent transition in your life where you're getting to do what you want to do and really go for it. So why don't you describe like your training schedule, your event schedule, your travel schedule, and how it all came to be.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's I have the luxury of having time. So with time, obviously I try to fill it with being creative, being healthy. So every day I sort of wake up and try to figure out what's going to be the most sensible way to stay healthy and active and moving till I don't want to live to 100.
No?
No, I'd rather play really hard.
Okay.
Not follow any rules really. And then when I go, but I'm going to go happy.
Could that be a success formula to get to 100 incidentally because of your attitude and your penchant for playing?
It very well could be. So in other words,
just not counting on it. You don't want a wheelchair to 100. You want to just, live long, drop dead, like Mark Sisson says.
So I guess what I'm saying is that I got really obsessive about diets and coming from the triathlon background. It was like logging miles and heart rate and all these things. And obviously the one thing that I think has driven most of that with anybody is ego. So it's been this process of trying to let the ego go. And the more I can let the ego go, it's not, meaning if I show up at a race or an event, it's not an ego that's driving me to perform well.
Right.
So it's more about like today's event where it's a community thing, where I want to be around people that are healthy. I want to be around people that sort of get the same vibe. And I guess like today's thing is about a trail runner just going out in the mountains and being able to, you can walk, you can hike, power hiking, which is a big thing with ultra running. You could go super high heart rates and kill yourself and be, first place and get to that, that post-race food quicker. But to me, it's just sort of, it doesn't matter if you're first or last. It's sort of what you get out of it today. So
how did you, how were you able to transition to this type of mindset versus when you were one of the tri-geeks dropped in the aero position and trying to beat everybody?
To be very honest, huge failure in a lot of, probably between 20 to 45, 50, failing at life, basically.
Do you still call it failure, or do you feel like your journey, some people have that high-minded reflection where it was all part of the process, but I'm not inclined that way myself, but that's a pretty harsh statement, but maybe we should,
go ahead.
Figure that out.
You can't be perfect in life, and I think everybody, again, when ego's involved and you expect something in life, whether it's driven by material objects or race results or going to the right university, whatever it might be, you're gonna fail. And I think the more you fail, I found the more I failed, the more I tried to make up for it with my insecurities of grabbing at things. Does that make sense?
What do you consider fail?
That's a good question.
I mean, what areas? Was it a failed business, not placing as high as you wanted in triathlon.
I think it was a common. I
whatever.
think it was relationships, friendships.
Mm.
I think it was failure to identify my childhood, issues from my childhood that ultimately led to my, probably the biggest downfall in my life. But again, with failure, obviously, if you're, I think, courageous enough and bold enough that if you look at failure, it's the greatest tool in life. There's no teacher, there's nothing that I learned in college or anything that failure did not teach me. But you have to accept it and be able to actually look at yourself.
Did that take a while? You mentioned the age group 20 to 45.
Oh, yes. It took a long time. So I guess it was sort of like, I think, Mark knows this well, it's documented between he and I, but it gets to a point when you're sort of at rock bottom and you sort of have to figure things out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of behavior experts that contend that you have to hit rock bottom before you're really ready to make lasting change. Is that your experience?
Yes. And so I can easily say yes, because I didn't know, obviously I'd gone through ebbs and flows in my life, and on paper, my life looked awesome.
Oh, is that so?
Well, I mean, I went to a good school. I was able to go off and model. We get in that stuff, and I was able to do triathlons. And on paper, when you think about how everybody is now, that seems like a glorious life. But I think honestly, and Mark was there at the beginning, he saw through a lot of the things. So in other words, if you got a good race result, it was false insecurities. And then if you're told like, okay, you're going to Tokyo and you're going to go model, and you're false insecurities, because again, you sort of buy into the, concept of like, this is a great life, and you're around these people. You lived in LA, you know what it's like.
So you were an athletic guy. You were able to make a good income modeling and have all these areas covered you're describing. But what was false about it? Like, what didn't feel right to you?
Ultimately, it was the downfalls, because I didn't know how to control my insecurities, which ultimately led to drinking and trying to numb things, not being able to deal with anger issues towards my family.
So the drinking was, you said before, we tend to grab for things when we fail. Is that one of your grabs?
Oh, yeah. I wanted to numb anything.
Okay.
So I never took any hard drugs. I never took drugs. But alcohol was definitely a way I could, because it was so socially acceptable.
Okay.
And modeling, let's go drink, or after a race.
After a hard day of modeling or racing.
Well, after, everybody would go to the nightclubs in Tokyo, and you have a good time. And, from the olden days, you'd go at races. Back in our days, there'd be kegs,
Sure.
And it was like, if you go hard, work out hard, you're going to, celebrate with your friends. And I was, I was never afraid to say no to a party. But then I realized that alcohol, you can numb things.
Okay.
And escape.
Very effectively. Immediately.
And escape. And I was incredibly lucky that I don't know why, but I never got into, because during the UCLA days, it was in the 80s with cocaine and all that stuff. And for some reason, that stuff never was my calling.
I mean, you were athletic and career successful this whole time, and the alcohol was in the picture.
And I could get away with it. Yeah, right. So I could train, go race.
Burn those calories off.
And then, train through the hangovers, and it wasn't the alcohol that was saying you can't race anymore because you're drinking too much.
Okay.
It was my friendships that were basically suffering, that were like, hey man, you got to sort of maybe check this at the door.
Okay.
Because you're maybe sort of not dealing with some things, And Mark obviously was one that was really in tune.
You're talking about Mark Sisson, who you've associated with for a long time. And
since I think I knew Mark since 86, 87. So he saw everything.
He saw it all playing out.
He saw it all
He
playing
was looking out for you, and
I mean, we can get into the whole thing about adoption and everything, but it was like I used to use adoption because I was adopted as I was entitled to things. I was the victim. And I remember years ago, he's like, dude, that's not going to fly.
He's very good at the practicality and the, cutting to the cause rather than trafficking in some of the things we like to do when we're dancing around an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you need friends like that, right?
No, absolutely.
I mean, a lot of times we have friends who are sympathetic to our, feeling bad about being adopted or whatever. And then some people tell you straight, like, all right, enough.
Yeah, that was Mark from the get-go. And he was always the person that, and I'll remember, I'm like, hey, man, I'm a model, I'm doing this. And he's like, yeah, but it's not going to last forever. And he was the very first, I had agencies, and agents say, oh, it's like, they live for the moment, blah, 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 and you get caught up in it. And he was the one person that was like, dude, this is not going to last forever.
Save some money, et cetera.
What are you going to do? So what are you going to do? And it's just like, you have to think beyond this.
How long did you do that for? Was it exclusively in Japan, or?
Mostly in Japan, Asia/Japan.
So you're traveling a lot back and forth?
That, and then I was mixing triathlons because you could stay for 3 months, model, live in model apartments. So it sort of worked hand in hand. Then I got agencies in Barcelona, Athens. So it was fun. But again, when Mark said that stuff to me, I was like, what do you know, man? Obviously he knew.
So it was fun. You're somewhat healthy, even if you think you're drinking too much at times. So what was that you needed to numb?
Childhood, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, this is going to be a very helpful show for a lot of people. There's a lot of experts talking about that childhood programming and how we're playing it out the rest of our lives. It sounds like also that you've come to terms with this more so than maybe the next person walking down the path, where you can say, hey, how's your childhood affect you today? Most people are not quite connected, but you got into this, huh?
Yes. I mean, so the bottom line is that I was never alcohol. It's like when I would drink, so, but it wasn't like I drank every day or every week. But when I wanted to numb something, I would seriously go numb it, where I could drink, a lot of, 2, 3, 4 bottles of wine. What would happen is that there got to a point where the anger would come out with the alcohol, and it would get me in trouble. And then obviously there was people that didn't know me that well or intimately, like Mark Sisson did, where they were labeling me like, you're an alcoholic. And, so to me, it was sort of like, no, I'm just full of this anger and this rage. And I had to figure out where that was coming from. So to me, it's like, I think when you talk about this is my own personal belief. I think when you talk about addiction with anything, whether it's alcohol, drugs, triathlon,
keep going,
triathlon,
yeah.
You're trying to numb something, but that's coming from childhood trauma, in my honest belief. And everybody, I think, so in other words, when you think about if you had bad parents or if you were adopted, it comes from so many different spectrums.
Right.
But again, I think what triggers people is that childhood trauma. That's just because when I look at my past now, it's like it's all affected by my childhood. But the amazing thing is that now that I'm where I'm at now, it's hard to say, but it's like we have total control over that. But the question is, are you willing to accept it and not because I would put blame on my father and my mom and the adoption, and I was dyslexic, so there was all these other elements that sort of, and as I said, Mark was like, yeah, no, dude, you can't play the victim. You got it. You can't, you're not entitled to anything. You're going to have to work hard. And I was like, yeah, but you don't know where I came from. You don't know how I hurt.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
like,
A perfect response.
right.
Yeah. You're
'cause
stuck.
It's not me, man. It's everything else.
Yeah. It's someone else's fault. Yeah.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's like, if you don't, then if you don't want to hear me, you don't want to feel sorry for me, I'm going to go have a drink, a glass of wine, which would then turn into half a bottle. And then,
I mean, your perspective is unusual, where you claim to be the victim, but then you're turning that into an entitled mindset, which a lot of times someone feels like the victim and they are meek and underconfident and not entitled at all, but the opposite. So it's kind of like your coping mechanism to feeling like you had a rough go was to now think that you could do as you please or something.
yes.
Which would be full steam ahead. Mark doesn't know what he's talking about. My career is going to last forever. Whatever. I'm not going to have to deal with anything except for.
I think the downfall I had was that, again, I mean, we can get into it, but I came from parents that were divorced at 2. Then my mom sort of went on this journey of she wanted to travel the entire world, do her whole thing, living out of school buses and vans. And I had 2 parents that were highly educated. Like my dad was Harvard, Med, Yale. My mom went to Barnard. But my mom lived this lifestyle where it was like my brother wanted to graduate 2 years early because he wanted to get out of the whole system. My sister was an exchange student. And then I took myself out of where she was living in the Lopez Island in the San Juans. And then called my grandmother up, and I just couldn't handle it anymore. And I decided to go to Seattle to go to a public school there.
Wow.
So with all that, what had happened is that then I wanted to go to a college, and with hard work and all this stuff, I realized that, excuse the language, but fuck everybody. I can do it on my own because look at these results. And it empowered me in a really false way. Because again, if you go from Lopez Island to Roosevelt High School, down to UCLA, to then being discovered as a model, then going off and doing all these other things, it's it's an incredible false sense of security.
How'd you get discovered? Were you like Tom Hitnouse, the pole vaulter at UCLA? He was jogging down Sunset Boulevard, and Calvin Klein pulled over in his Rolls Royce and said, I need you to be my guy. And he was the guy in the poster. People are familiar with the multi-story banner of him in his underwear looking looking up. That was a UCLA pole vaulter discovered on Sunset Boulevard. Let's hear about Tom's.
So, I was discovered on Sunset Boulevard, but at Duke's Coffee Shop.
No way.
Do you remember Duke's?
No.
Duke's Coffee Shop was right
Shoot,
by...
I should have gone there. Could have got discovered.
So the classic thing was Duke's Coffee Shop was a coffee shop right by the Roxbury.
Oh, down there. Okay.
So, and it was borderline West Hollywood, but it was this coffee shop everybody would go to. And we would go to when we were at UCLA for breakfasts on Saturdays. And I would always get business cards from men asking me if,
because you're in West Hollywood, I guess.
West Hollywood. I would get a lot of business
That
cards.
was the play back then, a business card?
Business card.
For those of you young viewers, listeners, business cards are these small card stock about 3 inches by 1.5, and it would have your job on there. Okay, back to the show.
Right.
So they were propositioning you for business or for personal or both?
No, I think they would, because again, I was also working at the Sports Club LA. And the funniest thing, it was the big ultimate, that's actually where I met Mark.
Right.
But it was the big ultimate health club that was on Sepulveda Boulevard that the Lakers would train out of. And so I was a trainer there. And the funniest thing is if we were late, our punishment is we'd have to go to the Sports Connection in Beverly, or in the West Hollywood one. So which was...
To go work there.
Go work there.
Yeah.
And it's like, again, I don't care about being gay, straight. That doesn't bother me, but you'd go there, it would be constantly guys asking you out. So, it is what it is, and it would never affected me. But at the Deuce Coffee Shop, the guy comes up to me and gives me his business card, and I said, no, thank you. And he's like, no, call my wife. So I looked at it. It ended up being LA Models. So I called her up, and 2 weeks later, I was in Tokyo.
Oh,
yeah.
So you were one of the, I think those are like 99% scam. And then 1%, the guy saw you and thought, hey, maybe this guy could go to Tokyo in 2 weeks.
Right. So the thing with back in the day was that the Tokyo market was blowing up. You would make, it was a 3-year or 3-month contract. Because I'm half Hawaiian, I could cross between, I had a very Asian appeal.
Yeah.
So that was, and plus my height, because I'm small.
So they don't want a 6'2" guy. They want a...
Well, no, it's because all the clothes over there are not for the 6'4" Greek gods that go to Paris or Milan. So, yeah, so that, I have 3 weeks, or, 2 weeks later, I was in Tokyo.
Were you still in school?
Yes.
So did you manage both of those?
No, so I would take a leave of absence because we're in the quarter system.
Yeah.
Which worked great for a while until they said, dude, you're going to
in or out.
And I'd have to go to Santa Monica Junior College.
Oh my
all these
gosh.
things to just make up things.
But it was really lucrative, and it was a great discovery for you.
Yeah, you would make, the contracts were like $80,000 to $100,000 for three months.
This is in the 80s, 90s?
Late 80s, early 90s.
So you young listeners now, that's about 4 times or 3x what we're talking about today. So if you're making 80,000 in the late 80s, that's like making 320 today in a few months.
It was good money.
That's big.
Which, again,
I totally would have done that if I was allowed. Yeah. So you're young, you're making a lot of money, and you're getting a lot of attention. I mean, a model is an attention attractive job.
Yeah, it's when I see these people who want to be influencers now, I just shake my head. I'm like, they'll learn. They're going to learn the hard way.
Learn what?
Again, it doesn't matter. One of the things that I learned from the whole experience going through the things that I went through with, Mark Sisson and stuff is eventually you have to be real to yourself. Honestly, I had to, if you want to get into Mark took a time out with me for a couple of years where it was like, I was like, oh my gosh, he's not there anymore.
Was that a calculated play by him as looking at the big picture and saying, I can't help you, so I'm going to try to help you indirectly by shutting you out or something?
It could be. I mean, I know it could be.
Maybe he was just sick of your ass too.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So
I mean, it was too much alcohol, too much.
But you weren't around him drinking too much, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was. I'll never forget the night.
Oh, okay.
We had a dinner party at his house, and it was
some anger coming out again. That was your pattern?
To be honest, it could have been.
You don't remember? Yeah.
I knew, but I remember leaving, and I knew that I burned that bridge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was that day when I was driving back from Malibu up back to San Francisco, I pretty much quit drinking. I just stared at a wall. It's like, I kid you not, I had my place, and I the only thing I knew how to do, which was, all right, these are the problems. This is what's in the way. You can fix this by, taking it one day at a time and just going the opposite direction.
Are you saying that you did this by yourself, or did you go into...
So 100%. I've gone, people had said you should go to AA meetings, you should go to a therapist, you should do all this stuff. And it was just the one thing that I did. And I remember I just, no TV, I just looked at a wall. It just cried and realized it was my dyslexia that was getting to me. It was all these things. And so the dyslexia to me was the one thing that made me always feel incredibly insecure. And so when I realized insecurities led to a lot of the things I wanted to numb.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So dyslexia is thrown in there as, maybe dyslexia is real, and being a highly paid model at a young age is very difficult to accept that that's real. It's sort of like fantasy land.
So with the dyslexia, so from the get-go, my mom always knew there was a learning disability. Back in the day, nobody knew what dyslexia was. They just sort of, you're going to the special needs room, you're going to be held back. It was, and I hate to use the word, but they just basically, he's, semi-retarded. So there was really nobody knew anything about it.
Right.
So I would turn things around. The grammar was really bad.
Yeah.
I couldn't, when I would read, I'd have to read a paragraph over and over and over. And without school driving me, because I had to get grades in order to, to get into schools and stuff, or to get, to survive in school, there was zero reason after the modeling came into existence. There was zero reason to continue that.
Right.
Because why?
Yeah, you're suffering, and now you're on top of the world.
Right. And my mom was always like, this is, the most important muscle that you can work is your brain. And you're going to have to work extra hard. And I was like, I don't have to now. Sort of.
Right, because you mentioned your parents and their highly educated realm, and that gets projected onto kids automatically, whether it's hard driving parents or even ones that are in the background. It's just there in your being,
Yes. So back to what I think really started to make me realize I could control this whole thing was that I just literally, when I remember going on Amazon, buying a book, and I'm like, okay, if you can't read really well, you're going to master reading. You're going to work this dyslexia. Because again, if it's one element that's making you insecure, let's just go focus there for 30 days. So for 30 days, the goal was to try to read a book. For 30 days, the goal was to always go out and work out for 45 minutes or just move, so, and then obviously, and then not touch alcohol.
Just so this was the starting point. You're staring at a wall.
Yep.
Then you buy the book on Amazon.
Yep.
Then you're going to go get into your training and
And it was every single day was if I could read a chapter, I can move for 45 minutes. And if I could stay away from the alcohol and feeling like, I was the victim, which there's plenty of times at night where it would be all like, well, I could go down to bed, smoke, and numb this real quick and screw Mark, screw everybody. I'm the victim. Or I could, I remember a couple times where I would want to go to Bevsmo, and I would go out, and there was this one walk I would do. And I remember it was like 9 p.m. or something. I said, okay, you're just going to walk.
Instead.
Yeah. And you're going to wake up, and you're going to redo the whole thing again tomorrow.
That's pretty heavy, man, that you're able to pull that off. I mean, that snares people,
but when
especially at the start.
If you break it down, it's one chapter or one page. It's 45 minutes. And if you really think about it, it's like if somebody walked to a store from their house, which is less than a mile, maybe a mile.
Yeah.
Then you walk back, you got your 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, obviously the rest of the day you got to fulfill it.
Yeah.
But if you just get through 24 hours, what I've learned with Ultra is if you can get through 24 hours, the next day, there's always the next day. And what is 24 hours? And the whole, we're really talking about this whole thing. So to me, it was like, all right, if you're having a horrible day today, just get through it. If you got to stay up all night and look at a wall, it's what you're going to do. Because, the shame and guilt and all the stuff I felt driving up I-5 from Malibu was horrible.
Well, that's great. I mean,
if
you didn't give an F and said F off to the host, then you'd be in a different position, but you were ready to transform. The shame and guilt was adaptive, as Brene Brown would say.
Yeah, it was horrible. And that I-5 drive.
Pretty boring.
It was
a lot of time to think about. You're staring at a wall or a line on the road. Yeah.
There's
no distractions. Sorry.
Probably was going the speed limit. It was the longest drive I'll ever remember mentally.
That's amazing. I mean, that was, that's a true turning point.
Yeah, it kicked me in the nuts hard.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you had high regard for your relationship with Mark and the status of the relationship or the acceptance or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the one person that was always there. As I said, he's known everything about my life. He met my mom before she passed away, knew everything about just all the intimate things.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one person that never gave up on me. And I gave up on our friendship. And that's why I was like, oh, man. It was like...
So in that unfortunate evening incident there, the dinner party,
Yeah.
is that the power of the alcohol that you were able to trash that respected relationship, or was it maybe time for you to bust up your life because you wanted to hit bottom and that was your bottom?
So,
like why did that happen? Mark's your guy. He's always looking out for you. You go to a dinner party, you're supposed to have a nice time, and instead you make a fool of yourself and get kicked out.
right. So this was not one night.
This was the
Hanukkah
dinner party, and it was night number 7.
No, so there was always the Malibu Triathlon.
Yeah.
I'd always visit him. He'd always be gracious and open his home to me, and I'd always stay there. So this was one too many times, one too many drinks, where it's done. So it wasn't like one night.
Yeah.
It wasn't. No, it was like
It wasn't like you broke Carrie's expensive crystal. It was just finally, after this pattern,
you
he
push something
finally
hard
called the
enough,
pattern.
7-8 years.
Yeah, he called the pattern out. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But and he was very, because I remember I was down there with my friend, and I remember he took him aside and was like, "Is he okay?" And it was things like that where it was like, now I look back on it and I'm like, man, that talk about friendship, talk about compassion and really caring, And so to me, it's like, now that I can see that with clarity, that's why I'm saying I'll take failure any day, because those are the gifts to understand of, true compassion from somebody from Mark. To me, it's not about, it's that he literally took a friend aside and said, "Is he okay?"
Right.
And I'm like, that's priceless. You can't, that's true love and friendship. And
you got to have some guts to do it too. I mean, it's uncomfortable. And I find in my reflections, like every time I've stuck my neck out and been an annoying pain in the butt, sitting down, I sat down with a couple about to get divorced, and we went out to dinner, the three of us, and I got into it with both of them. And by the end of the night, they were both pissed off at me. And I drove home with a big smile on my face, because it's like, you know what? I stepped up, I did what I needed to do,
right.
And they ended up getting divorced. But you know what I'm saying? It's you have to go for it if you really are a friend at every level.
And it's funny. I don't know how many people know Mark at the level that I know him, but the things that you see, and obviously he's well known. It's like nobody knows the incredible, the real nuggets that are in there. So to me, that's, as I said, if I get to see him in Kona in a couple weeks, and barely, we see each other just because obviously, he lives in Miami and stuff now, but it's so appreciative now. It's just, if it's a lunch, or if it's a phone call, or
so we're gonna try to keep the storyline going, but I do wonder with this this modeling career, how did that wind up as Mark predicted?
What do you mean, how did it wind up?
How did it end?
Yeah.
How, why, when did it end?
I worked it for 25, 30 years. So when I moved to San Francisco, I was still doing commercials, and it then, it's...
I guess it's unlike a career at the law firm. It could end tomorrow because it's just your next gig and your next gig, or it could wind down, or whatever it has.
So here's the blessing I had, and I never understood it, and I don't recommend modeling to anybody.
especially females.
But when you see the models and you see the very few supermodels are like, you could lay on a cover of Vogue, you don't get paid for anything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you can go all over Europe and Milan and all these things. They don't make money. So the big money is doing commercial print, like holding a stick of butter, or doing, a regional commercial where you're getting your residuals. And so usually they want real people. They want people that, I guess sort of look like me, which I don't look white. I don't look Hispanic. I can look Hispanic. I could look Hawaiian.
Just dress them up, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So in other words, it's very appealing across the board to the art directors that are then casting the commercials or the commercial prints. And so I learned very quickly that you can make a fortune over in Tokyo, which slowly started to evaporate. But then it was the commercial print and lifestyle stuff where you could go on and on and on. I never shot high fashion stuff. Yeah, it was always.
So a model.
Obviously.
A model in that respect, which people can expand.
I did lifestyle. Yeah. It's like.
Yeah, lifestyle.
The dude with the wife holding the stick of butter, which,
the Japanese butter. Love it.
I mean, I did at Microsoft. They would buy out. So Microsoft would own you, but they would buy out for $25,000 for a year, and they could use. So in other words, you could never work for another. You couldn't work for Apple,
right?
But Microsoft would own you for a year, and they could use your image for anything. And you'd go in and you do the photo shoot,
like a sponsored athlete.
Very much so. And so you'd have the option of like, do you want the contract?
Yeah.
And I was like, for $25,000 for a year, sure, why not?
Yeah.
So I did stuff for AT&T, Microsoft, all these companies where, but again, I wish I had a little more maturity with it. So,
well, that seems like a really challenging thing to have your head screwed on straight in that type of, it's a distorted environment. It's not putting in your 17 years at the post office and then,
there's nothing. It's an interesting thing when you go into a casting room with 20 guys that look just like you.
And you're scary.
You're ripped apart. So again, with somebody who came from a background of being really insecure with the adoption and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, it was horrible.
But this is so interesting because obviously we can all relate to that, how you're easily intimidated by tremendous competition, but then you were successful beyond wildest imagination. And so how do you reconcile? Like, you're still insecure, you still got, quote, issues from childhood, but then you're the butter guy. You're the butter stick guy on the billboard. You couldn't, at a certain point, I would imagine, like, you'd have to start convincing yourself, geez, maybe I am pretty awesome and successful at my career.
It can go both ways, meaning you can feel incredibly, you can get hammered really hard and it builds a wall, which is you're in denial, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And it can flip around in one day, 24 hours, where you're the greatest thing on earth.
Yeah.
And
that can really F you up.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Is in like, again, when I lived in LA, I think for 18 years, and it was like, if you were with the right agency, you got to the right parties and you knew the right people, and it was like, but again, it's sort of, that doesn't help when it comes to, I turn words around when I read a book. It doesn't help when I still feel really insecure about my adoption.
Yeah.
It doesn't help with the anger towards my dad. Because then it's sort of like, I went from Lopez to Roosevelt to UCLA to being a model to go fuck everybody. Look at me. Look how great I am. Where, again, Mark was the one guy who could see right through that stuff. And I've never met somebody that could see that clearly. Because everything that he told me back in the 90s, I think, came true. He probably doesn't even know
clairvoyant,
because I'm like, oh man, he's right.
Wow. So you were staring at the wall, then you got the book on Amazon, you're doing your 45-minute walks, you're staying away from alcohol, and how's that continuing on?
So here's the funniest thing. So if you talk about addiction and you talk it, so something good, like every single day I'm going to do 45 minutes, has also been incredibly toxic because I have not worked out. Now for this coming November, will be 8 years straight without missing a day.
Wow.
And I have not
from illness or anything or
COVID, nothing is taking
traveling across the international date line. COVID, you're out there getting a sweat on, or
right? Nothing.
Dang. So
I've walked around in an airport 7 miles.
Oh,
just around a terminal.
All right,
just to keep the streak going.
Yes, streaks are delicate, I think, and of course, most people would laud a exercise streak, but do you feel like you've had that tight wire where maybe it could compromise your health, mental or physical?
Do I feel that?
Yeah.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So
it's incredibly unhealthy.
But it's being replaced. You're replacing alcohol, so it's an incredible.
But again, you have
step
to
forward.
But you have to that's the loaded gun. Is because here's my thing is you have to realize alcohol never called me. So in other words, if I'm not drinking, and let's say I'm in a relationship, but the number one thing is I got to work out and I have to do this race, or it's me.
Yeah.
It's just as toxic.
Yeah.
As drinking.
Yeah.
Because it ultimately, then it's going to destroy a relationship.
I mean, it could, but there's a lot of people working with a lot of addictions and just doing the best they can. But the Buddha says attachment leads to suffering, which is true. You're attached to whatever, and we write about this in the Born to Walk book. There's a chapter called the obligate runner, and the obligate runner is one who needs their workout in order to feel whole or to feel baseline. In other words, they feel bad if they miss a workout, and that is the definition of addiction.
Yeah,
and it's just also society completely disregards your perspective because they're using exercise to treat the more serious addictions. I mean, running and exercise is one of the main protocols to keep people away from drugs.
Right.
So now, how do you get support for a person who's suffering from an exercise addiction? Oh, generally, it's people have no empathy.
So my question to you is like, and I don't know because it's like it doesn't really affect my life anymore, but you see a lot of recovering alcoholics doing Ironmans, or doing ultras, 100-mile races. To me, it's sort of like when you really, because what I've come to terms of is any inflammation, any stress load is going to kill us. So stress load could be obviously physical stress, mental stress, any kind of diet we're eating with inflammatory foods, alcohol, these things. But then you have this group that thinks that racing, I don't drink anymore, but I'm going to go race 9 Ironmans in a year. And I'm like, what is, again, I'm not saying the person that's, waking up or sitting outside the Safeway at 6 a.m. to try to get booze. I'm saying, hey, I don't drink anymore, but I've only raced only 4 Ironmans this year. So you take the 4 Ironmans and you multiply it by how many hours they've worked out. And then you look at the diets and the sugars they eat in order to do it. It's like this vicious.
Yeah.
And that's where I've talked about when you think about ego. So the validation of like, and I don't know how many Ironmans I've raced, but I'm very proud that I don't have an Ironman tattoo.
My favorite snide comment about that is from Andrew McNaughton, and he'll see someone at the pool. As you might know, a lot of times the Ironman tattoo goes on the hip, so it's revealed with a Speedo.
It's not,
but not otherwise. They put them on their calf too, like where the race number goes. But a lot of times it's there. You see someone at the pool, and Andrew would go up to someone and say, "How much did you get paid to have that tattoo?" And the person's like, "What do you mean? I paid $180 to the tattoo artist." He goes, "But you're putting a corporate logo on your body. They should pay you." That's like, Palooza can pay us to sponsor this show with logos, but if I get a Palooza tattoo on my body, I'm going to ask for top dollar. Top dollar, man. A tattoo?
And you get
Are you kidding?
You get residuals. You get residuals off of that.
So the Iron Man tattoo is That's a sign of being deep into the game. Yeah.
No, I mean, what I'm saying is that you can do whatever you want to do.
That's right. Yeah.
But to
You
me-
earn the tattoo in that case.
But
so
to me, that's ego.
right.
I'm a part of something. And what I've learned now is that, I mean, we can get into it with the walking and all this stuff. To me, it's like the greatest gift has been to understand why I drink. That time I spent leaving Mark's house, understanding how ego, if you let it go, you still get these endorphins and you still get these incredible goals that you can go after, but there's such a personal journey. So in other words, when I do, these trail runs, I don't care how I do, because the brilliance of it is that you can hike, you can walk, and then you can show up and you can actually, because of my background, I can still fire up the engine and run, not very fast, but I can hit the cutoff times and I can have the time of my life and enjoy it, and it's for me.
Right.
And that's all I care about, is because, again, I feel like I'm going in a direction, but I'm really aware that, okay, what are the costs? If you go, 35 miles, that's a cost. If you go 100K, which is 62 miles, that's all. You go into the bank again, and then you get these people that want to do UTMB, which is a 100-miler, or Western States. I'm not saying it's wrong, but again, how much are you willing to go to the bank? And then you think about the training, you think about the sugars and the sleep patterns and all these things. And I don't know. It's not worth it to me.
Well, it's not wrong, but it's not healthy. So we don't have to judge anybody's things that turn them on and their passions and their goals, but it's decidedly unhealthy, and you can't argue your way out of that.
Right. So I guess the whole point I'm getting at, I've learned the more I let my ego go, the more I can be in tune. There's nothing more enjoyable to me than hiking and walking by myself with no music. That's it. And I realize it's because I'm fine-tuning this incredible endurance machine I've had for 4 decades. And then I really pay attention to if my back starts to go or where the fatigue is, because then it's really simple. I just, functional strength. You don't have to do a lot.
You showed me some of that earlier. My back's a little stiff.
A little founder action.
Yeah.
You can throw a kettlebell around. I learned from Peter Park the simplicity of just, he's like, are you doing, hangs? Are you hanging? Strength.
Yeah.
I'm like, why would I do that? He's like, okay, whatever. So the idea of doing grip strength, what people don't really realize how incredible that is, and how
it's a longevity marker. That's why the machines in most doctors' offices, it's a proxy for longevity.
Really? I didn't even know.
Yeah, if your grip strength is weak, it's directly correlated with your predicted lifespan.
Really?
Yeah, and they also have research for squat competency, push-up competency, your time in the 1 mile run. That's the famous Cooper Institute marker. If you're fast, if you're under 8 minutes at age 50 in the mile, or 9 minutes for females, you have a high predictability of living to 85 in good health. If you're over 12 minutes or 13 minutes at age 50, if you can't break 12 or 13 for an all-out mile, you have a hugely increased risk of demise and accelerated aging. It's obviously it's a proxy, but we need to respect these things even more than, oh, your blood work looks normal this year, see you next year. It's like, what's your grip strength, man? What's your hang time?
Right.
All that stuff.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
So anyway, every day I go out, it's like, it's these small, teeny things I'm so in tune with my body, where I'm like, I just pivot and make it, Mark likes that word, by the way, pivot.
He made it up, and now everybody uses it in every industry.
Pivot.
MBA schools have a Pivot 103 class.
So some weeks I really focus on just strength, mobility, functional strength, mobility, just really simple. Maybe, 2 mile walk. And then sometimes I'll lay it down and go for, 15, 20 mile, run / power hike.
Yeah.
But I'm super in tune of just how my body feels at this point.
So your ego's kept in check finally after years and years.
It's still there, but
I mean, do you feel like relating to the exercise streak, do you strive for more personal growth, transformation there, where you don't need to be connected in that way, or are you okay with it? I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. You're only exercising for one on an easy day. So it's not I'm not terribly concerned that you're addicted to a streak, but do you know what I mean? Like, is there another level of ascension where you're enjoying whatever life brings you, and you can go with the flow, and if you miss a workout, you're okay, you'll do it the next day? That's what I'm asking.
So I thought the thing that I was going to attack at the end of this year was to stop the streak.
Yeah.
Because I thought that's me going to Amazon, getting a book, reading a book, because if I could stop the streak,
yeah,
I'm going to be able to control this obsession that, it's day 3,000 or whatever it is in a row.
Uh-huh.
But then I started to realize that I never get in my car. I always walk to the store.
Wow.
And I always walk back, and it takes me 55 minutes to 60, and I always get 2.5 miles. And I just don't know how the streak ever ends.
Yeah, I wouldn't even count that as like as a fitness addiction, because it's a whole nother category.
Right, but it's still, when you think about it, which is crazy. And the funniest thing is, it's sort of going off on a tangent, but there's a McDonald's and a Jack in the Box on the way home from this thing.
Yeah.
And it's insanity when I think about it, is because I've actually had people I know that live in Lafayette go, "Why? We saw you with a backpack. Why?" And I'm like, "Well,
what were you doing?
I was walking to the store. Why?"
Yeah.
And then you walk by McDonald's.
That's no joke.
If you go by McDonald's during 12 to 1:30 in the afternoon, there's a line.
Wow.
And then you take a look inside the car, and you're like, there's no way that human being has ever walked to the store.
Yeah.
And then you go to this, anyway, it's just, so it's sort of just built in, and I just can't imagine, because, I'm not one of those types that goes to the store and buys a week's worth of groceries.
You go every day, like a proper European living, healthy,
The blue zone.
Yeah, man. So in recent years, you quote unquote retired and launched this odyssey. So I want to hear more about that, because I really haven't kept too close connection with you for many years, even though I've known you. But then, I keep looking on Instagram, and you're in a different country, in a different race, with your arm around the world champion of whatever sport. And I'm like, Mark, what's this guy doing? Everything I see on him, he's in the Ironman. He's at the Mont Blanc Ultra Trail. He's back at the Ironman. He's now doing this. He's now doing that. So you're cranking up the volume here. What's going on?
How do I get, what do you mean?
Yeah, how are you getting around? What are you doing going to all these races, and how are you schmoozing with all the top athletes in the world every week on Instagram?
Well, to be honest, life is really odd. And so to me, I don't know even how to explain this thing. I honestly feel like I've won the lottery. And what I mean by that, when you think about how I was brought up and the relationship I had with my father, which there was non-existent.
Wow. This is because divorce happened at age 2?
My dad he was married to his work. He was an eye surgeon, he was married to his work.
Yeah.
And he wanted nothing to do with his children. And that's.
Is this your adoptive parents?
Yes.
Okay, so everything you're saying is about your adoptive mom and dad.
Correct.
And they got divorced at age 2?
2.
So you lived with your mom and didn't see your dad much?
No, it was one of those things where I would see our dad every 3 weeks.
Uh-huh.
And then my mom decided that she wanted us to see the world.
Right.
And it's weird, it's because people are like, "Oh, that sounds so cool," but she literally bought a school bus.
Uh-huh.
And she made it into, it was probably the first time it ever happened, made it into, a place you could live. And we literally, when it was still British Honduras and Guatemala, she was a professor at San Miguel de Allende, which is a town down in Mexico. We spent 2 to 3 years in Mexico. Then that's one instance. Then she had this great idea. She was going to buy a camper in London. And we were going to go to every single country in Europe, even when Yugoslavia was Yugoslavia. But we would be in each country for a month, and we had to learn everything about that country and then take correspondence courses.
Wow.
So on paper, it sounds really phenomenal and sexy. But when you think about, we had no friends.
How old?
it started in 1972, Mexico.
Yeah.
And then it continued. Europe was...
So how old are you at these times?
I don't know. I'm 58 now. I'm just like...
We're similar age. So you started as a young guy. I mean, 6 years old.
I
born in 66.
Yeah. I've gone through, I don't know how many passports.
How did I know that so quickly? Wow.
Because you're brilliant.
Yeah, the stamps. Those of you young listeners, they used to have these passports that you'd stamp with a decorative stamp, and now I think they hover it over the Apple Pay.
Get out of here.
Yeah,
if you want a stamp, get out of here.
But when he says fill the passport, it means the passport, the little booklet, has a bunch of pages, and they stamp each time you enter a country. So if you fill a passport, you're legit.
And then if you filled it up and it wasn't expired, you got extended pages. You remember those?
Wow, a little fold-in thing.
Yeah, no, it was a sticker and it was...
Yeah, crazy. Wow, extended pages, yeah. So that was, I mean, yeah, I can understand. It's not template, and it requires, like you said, no friends, and you're looking for...
So to get to your point, so basically what had happened is it did affect my brother and sister were biological.
Yeah.
I was an adopted kid. It sort of had an effect on us.
Yeah.
None of us had a relationship with our dad. Dad is 94 now.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
All the kids have been gifted money now.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's allowed me to never have to work again. And then so when you think about finances and you think about the lessons I've learned from Mark and alcohol, what I've realized, the greatest thing, currency that you have and that money has bought me is time.
Mm.
So to me,
time equals freedom too.
The most precious thing I have, and it's not like I have oodles of money, but I have the greatest currency, which is time. I have time to spend with the people I really care about. And for somebody like Mark, for an example, it's like I get to work on that friendship, even if it's once a year, twice a year. I get to see him once every 2 years, I should say. I want to invest in that where it's just like, I'd rather have less friends and work on the ones that mean the most to me. And then being able to have time to do anything you want that aren't material objects, whether it's cars, watches, homes, lavish hotels or whatever, that's the gift.
Mm.
I mean, to this day, I'll go on Expedia and get the ticket where you don't know what seat you're in until you check in.
Right.
So I refuse.
Right.
I'm going to save $100.
Yeah.
It's,
it's a rip-off.
I may be back by the bathroom where you can't,
bummer, yeah.
But I'm like, it can't be that bad. It's only, what's the longest?
There's no smoking section anymore, so it's not that bad.
So
it's better than driving.
Some people call me cheap, but I just say, hey, man, it allows me to have more time. So
you've chosen to use this free time on a pretty impressive binge of endurance achievements and conquests.
Yeah, so I think what happened was that during I don't know, most people hate me for saying that. I like COVID, the pandemic. And the reason why is because the only thing you could go do would be go to, Yosemite, for example.
Yeah.
And there was no races, and you had to be creative. And my friend and I, Joni, were tying, clouds rest together with, the clouds rest, Half Dome hikes to the El Cap Trail. You could do all these things where it was, 30, there are a lot of miles, a lot of vertical. No finishers awards, no tattoos involved.
No lines.
No lines. And we sort of just, I sort of got into this thing with ultra running.
Mm.
Where I was like, I wonder what a 50K is like.
Mm.
I wonder what a 100K is like. If I could have anything, it would be, I spent 2 years ago in Chamonix during UTMB. And
it's a big ultra race there. Ultra trail.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and I would just could literally wake up at 3 a.m, put my head torch on, and just get lost. And so it wasn't, I did it, the ETC, which is the baby race out there.
Yeah.
But to me, it was just getting lost out in that region. And
So you're starting from lodging in a town, then you're heading out onto the trail. How does it work?
I'm sorry?
How does it work?
You go out the door.
Yeah. I mean, is it a multi-day event or something?
No, I would go out and just break the sections up. So I would go up and La Bravette, for an example. There's so many trail systems, but you just get lost out there for days or hours or whatever. Obviously, the circumference of Mount Blanc is 110 miles.
Okay.
At 32,000 vertical. A lot of people will hike it in 10 days, 7 days.
Yeah.
The race, most people are doing the race in, the 19 hours to 48 hours.
Yeah.
But you can break it up, you can, my race was in Courmayeur, which is right through the Mont Blanc tunnel. Same sort of region, completely different mountains.
Yeah.
So the experiences are just, I would prefer to do that than swim in Kailua Bay at Ironman.
So are you doing Ironman distance tries or any tries anymore?
Well, here's a funny story. One night the only race I've never done that I've always thought about doing was Roth. Roth?
Ironman in Germany, in the town of Roth.
Roth. You can't get in.
It's very packed. All these,
it's impossible to get in. Yeah. There was 41 available slots on this Christmas lottery, and I just, I signed up with 7,000 people in a minute or something, and didn't get in.
Imagine that.
And then the funniest thing is that I got an email the next day, and they said, "You're the first lucky loser." And since somebody didn't pay for it, I got in.
Oh my gosh! So you were 42nd out of 7,000.
Yeah, and with literally
your numbers up, man.
And the funniest thing, unlike Ironman, I've deferred it for 2.5 years. And you get your money back. And the funniest thing is when you defer it, or you just I don't want to do it, you automatically get an option to race again.
Wow!
So.
Right.
To answer your question.
Yeah. You're going to do it someday?
I'm doing it in July.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I'm going to rent a bike. It's going to be a road bike.
Yeah.
I'm not going to train for it.
Oh.
Because I did Ironman California 2 years ago.
Yeah.
On no training.
It came okay?
Yeah.
Because you're out there exercising every day, man.
I don't know about that. Just swimming in that river was something. And running through downtown Sacramento.
Oh, yeah. I couldn't believe they put people in the Sacramento River. It's like the Mississippi.
That was the one.
It's not clean and pristine. It's a massive river flowing the whole length of the state. Yeah.
It was a one and done.
Yeah.
But I think that will be it for triathlons after that.
And what's ahead for you in the years ahead? Like, you got your time, you can take it in any direction.
Just every single day, man, trying to create the ultimate blueprint.
Tom Hodge, people. A very interesting conversation. I knew we'd get some fun stuff out of this.
There you go.
You know, one more follow-up I'm going to say. When we hear about this subject of childhood trauma all the time, it's now coming into the limelight as a big thing. Yeah, and all the therapists are talking about it and hitting the point that ages 0 to 7 is when you're being programmed in the subconscious, and then you're carrying these things and living out these issues for the rest of your life in different ways. And you spent a lot of time reflecting on this and hitting bottom as you described. What do you think's a tip or a technique to break through from this shit that ruins or manages our lives when it was a long time ago? And as Mark Sisson say, you know, you can forget about that shit and quit being a victim, but it's not so easy in real life. What is that trigger that can help someone make a breakthrough? Relating specifically to that
Here's the bottom line. The bottom line is I think you have to really look at who's around you. Okay.
In present time.
Just in present time. Who are your friends? Who are the people that are influencing you? Unfortunately, in social media now, like what inspires, if fashion, races, or whatever's inspiring you in social media, I think that's no, it's not good. Meaning that you have to be, in my humble opinion, you have to be able to sit in your own shit, your own thoughts, and come up with your own conclusion. You cannot have a therapist. You can't have nothing bad about Mark telling me these things. Obviously, it didn't work because I never listened to him. So I need to listen.
I forgot about that element of the story. Yeah, I've known Mark since '86, and
you never listened.
Yeah. The dinner party occurred in 2000 something. So,
yeah. So to me, it's like you have to be able to sit your own shit, understand that you got an issue. You can't have any distractions, and you slowly have to peel the layers off. Why am I insecure? Oh, it's because it's like I don't feel like I can read well, and I'm a grown man. Why do you feel insecure? Oh, it's because maybe you have a little bit of this insecurity about being adopted. It has nothing to do with the abandonment issues and all that stuff. It's like, why are you so angry at your dad? Okay? It's like, if he treated you poorly, it doesn't mean that has to affect your life anymore. So when I was able to really slow things down and not overthink it, and just, as I said, if I can get through today and just be okay with who I am, me, it doesn't matter. It doesn't, because I don't care what anybody thinks anymore. I am who I am, and I'm flawed, and I have faults, and I make mistakes, and at the end of the day, it's like, hey, man, it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to take ownership of, I was right. I made a mistake. I can't change it, but it's my mistake. I don't really care what you think. I'll correct it is because I know I'm wrong. And a lot of times I feel like when I see people, I didn't do that. I'm not wrong. They're trying to convince other people and not take ownership of what is simply, hey, man, if you drink too much, there's a reason why. If you have anger, there's a reason why. It wasn't like you were, you're not an angry human being when you come out into the world. Things affected, and it's okay. And you have all these people would put horrible labels on you. Meaning that, yes, in my day, if you had dyslexia, you were retarded. Some people called me a raging alcoholic, and they had the right. Because that's what my behavior patterns were. But to me, when you're an alcoholic, it's somebody who has to have a drink every single day. And if you can't stop it, I'm not saying you are, but if you can't stop having a drink every single day, maybe there's an issue there, which
we'll have a gentle discussion about that, but yeah.
And again, to me, that's why I look at the streak, is, there's still an addiction there. So to me, it's sort of like, that's not where I want to go in my life,
You said one thing in passing that I think is really important, and it was no distractions.
Zero.
Because I see now, especially like our age, we're the same age, we've had half of our lives to reference in the past where there wasn't that constant distraction, that ability to engage digitally and escape in a way. And so now I think we have the potential now to live the rest of our lives in almost constant distraction. So we don't have to face or deal with anything, but it keeps rearing its ugly head like you described. The drinking bringing out anger issues. It's like the drinking was just a catalyst for something that's there all the time because it hasn't been dealt with.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, today's world, I don't know how you could be a kid growing up in today's world. It's just, there's just too much out there, And again, it's like, I don't know what you want to call it. Meditation. I've always used this thing in my mind. I don't know. I call it clearing the Thanksgiving table off. And the idea is that if you can close your eyes and you can slowly clear the table off, great. to do that is a lot harder than it thinks, because again, if you get the knife or the fork off, and then all of a sudden you think about, the weather today, that's usually what will happen.
Right.
So again, you have to go back.
Oh.
And you again, so the process is, can you slow your thought process down in the simplest format? So in other words, you have all these apps and these self-help people on social media. I'm like, dude, just clear off a thing. If you can't do it, it doesn't mean that you're not. You got to go. It's repetition, over and over and over.
Yeah.
And what it's going to teach you is to slowly slow your brain down.
Yeah.
To where you're calm.
It's free. You don't have to.
And it's completely free. This guy was literally
at the Thanksgiving table.
I was literally talking to this guy the other day, and he was saying that the one thing that nobody does, and everybody's about, I can't sleep and I can't do this. But if you think about how amped up you are all day, he goes, all you have to do is stretch. Stretch at night. Very simple. Breathe. Release that stress when you're all like wound up or you've been sitting all day, and tell me you don't sleep better.
Yeah.
It's not fancy. It doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
So it probably doesn't work, right? You're like, no, it does.
Works good.
So,
all right. Stretch on that, why don't you?